Brad Underwood haters, I don't think you're going to like this episode.
You are Locked On Illini, your daily podcast on the Illinois Fighting Illini. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome all to another episode of Locked On Illini. Thank you all so much for joining me on this Monday morning and making us your first listen each and every day. My name is Sunny Verma. You can find me on all your favorite social medias, whether it's Facebook, X, Blue Sky, TikTok. I'm on all of them, and I'm talking to you on all of them because I invite all your guys' feedback. Just keep it constructive. That's the only thing I ask. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the channel and you're hitting the like button on this here video. As always, I do appreciate your guys' support. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. All right, it's Monday, the start of a week that's going to basically kick off a very difficult part of the Illinois basketball schedule. We've got UCLA coming up, and then we're going to have Michigan State coming up after that. There's going to be a lot to celebrate. We're going to be talking a little Kofi Cockburn. We're going to be talking a little Terrence Shannon Jr., But right now, I just kind of wanted to reflect a little bit on the season in general. Ever since that Rutgers loss, there's been a lot of fans and a lot of people in my very mentions of the live chats. And, if you are one of the everydayers and you join me for these post-game sessions, or you're listening to it afterwards, you hear them. There's a lot of people very upset with Brad Underwood. And, there's a lot of folks who think he's doing a pretty awful job this year. And even calling for his head. And for me, I maintain my silence because I don't necessarily agree with some of those points. And so I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about what I think of the job that he's doing so far this season. So Brad Underwood last year took this Illini team to an Elite Eight. Obviously, he's had the stigma for a while that he isn't able to make that second weekend of the tournament, and it's justified, right? A team that's been talented, has been upset a couple times during his tenure and was never able to make it to that second weekend. Flash forward to last year, and not only does he make it to the Sweet 16, he makes it to the Elite Eight, eventually succumbing to one of the best teams in recent memory in the UConn Huskies in the Elite Eight. Now, had Illinois been in a different bracket and not played against UConn at that particular point, who knows? Maybe Illinois could have gotten further. But I think there was a lesson in that game for Brad last year, and I'm going to get to that in a little bit. Now let's fast forward to this season. I know Illinois currently sits at 8-6 in the conference, and last check, I think Illinois was 7th in the conference. It may have changed a little bit on Sunday. I'm recording kind of halfway through the day, so I'm not sure how the standings are going to shake out. But again, sitting at 8-6 doesn't sound like it's an ideal scenario for Illinois. We are raising our expectations as a program, and I'm proud of that. I like the fact that we have standards here now where we want to compete for the Big Ten championship each and every year. And by simply just that context and that standard, then sure, maybe Brad Underwood is not doing a great job this year. But I know it's hard. Okay, there's Brad staunch defenders. There's Brad staunch haters who are, no matter what he does, they're going to hate on Brad. And then there's kind of people in between. I've always been in the in between. I do appreciate what Brad's done. And so right now he needs to do a lot wrong for me to jump off that bandwagon. I just think that the way he's turned around this program compared to what it looked like for the 10 years previous, I am so appreciative of it. And I do, especially now, this is, kind of a part of my job, a part of my career. I do try to take a step back and take my Illini hat off and try to judge him for what he's doing. And I still think he's actually doing a pretty good job. Illinois, from that last year's Elite Eight team, lost 10 guys. And, it's popular if you play video games, if you have any history of playing video games, sometimes in particular sports games or computer simulations. I know my being a nerd is coming out right now, but sometimes what you can do to make the difficulty extra hard is just to release all your players and then try to go win a championship in whatever game you're playing. Brad kind of had to do that this past season. He had to replace an Elite 8 roster, and he had to replace 10 guys. He thought it was only going to be 9, but he had to replace 10 on that roster this year. And a lot of you guys are going to say, well, that was his fault. And, this is what Brad does. He does this roster turnover year after year after year. And I think that's true to some extent, but not as drastic as some of you are making it out to be. Last year's team was built with the goal of making it to the Sweet 16. Brad decided the year before, he had gone with the hotshot freshman, right? He had the 5-star freshman in Sky Clark. He had the 4-star freshman, which he really liked, in Jaden Epps. And he tried to appease them. He tried to play them as many minutes as they wanted. The year before, there was the Adam Miller fiasco where he started him every single game and Adam still decided to transfer out. I think at the beginning of last year, he decided, you know what, I'm just here to coach basketball and I want to win basketball games. And I'm not going to be worried so much for egos other than my own. And that's because he is a competitor and he wants to win national championships. So he abandoned the all freshman team game plan from 2 years ago, and he went with veterans last year. Why? With the ultimate goal of making it to the Sweet 16. And you know what? By all measures, he not only met that goal, he surpassed that goal. And there's not a single person watching this, including the Brad Underwood haters, that would disagree with that point. Brad did exactly what he wanted to do. And had he not turned over his roster, had he not brought in the Damasks, the Guerriers, well, then if he had not made it to the Sweet 16, those same haters would be saying, see, Brad just can't make it to that next level. He's reached his ceiling at Illinois. Brad's adjusted halfway through, and he got to the point that he wanted to achieve, and not, again, being an Elite 8. But with that, a lot of the players on that team graduated. And because of a lot of those players graduated, they had to be replaced. They tried to bring Marcus Damask back. You guys all remember that. I talked about it on this very show during the offseason. They tried to get Marcus some kind of exception from the NCAA, but the NCAA simply wouldn't allow it. So what can you do? You have to move on. And that's what Brad did. Two of the guys in Monty Hansberry and Sincere Harris decided to move on with their coach, Chester Frazier. Let me circle back actually real quick. Brad, after that UConn game, made a mention that he now knows what a national title contender looks like. And it's true. Right now, in the modern day of college basketball, if you want to win a national championship, you have to either have a generational player, a guy who can be arguably one of the best college basketball players of all time, or NBA level talent on your team, even if they are one and done. He saw that up close with UConn. I think at that point, Brad is he became satisfied with what he's done within the Big Ten. Not that he's not still trying to win the conference. Not that he's still not competing and going out each and every day to compete to win the Big Ten conference. But I think Brad wants more. I think Brad is someone who is not going to be satisfied with just winning a Big Ten conference or a Big Ten tournament. He wants to win that national title. He almost got a taste of it last year. And so now with the NIL situation we have at Illinois, which is one of the better ones in the country, and with the fact that he had to replace so much of that roster last year, he's, in my opinion, aiming for that goal of bringing a national championship to Illinois. And whether he's hit that mark this year, it's hard to say. At 8-6, you wouldn't really think so. Maybe not when you take a step back. But if you go through the weeds a little bit, who are the 4 best players on this basketball team this year? It's Kasparas Strakushonis. It's Will Riley. It's Morez Johnson. And it's Tomislav Ivisic. In a year where he had a blank slate, and it was very risky, incredibly risky. He had to go out and find essentially 10 new pieces for his basketball team. He's hit, at the very least, I would call KJ a home run. I would call Will Riley right now a stand-up double with the potential of higher than that. Tomislav Ivičić, if you watched my Sunday episode, or if you're my everydayer in this show, you know I'm a big fan of. I think he's at least a triple. And Morez Johnson, I love the future that Morez has. And I think he's been arguably our best player over the past month or so, simply with his growth. As long as he can stay on the court, that seems to be the tricky thing about Morez. Replacing 10 guys is hard, but he's replaced 4 of them, and he's hit it out of the park. He's done such a fantastic job with the 4 best players on this basketball team. And not just that, Jake Davis. I really like Jake Davis's game. And if you're in my Discord, and if you're not, why not? I talk about this almost on a daily basis. Like, he's kind of like the coach's son who, when he's on the court, he may not jump out at you, but you can tell he knows where to be, and he knows that positive things happen when he's on the court. I think Jake Davis is going to be a huge part of next year's team. Kylan Boswell, Ben Hummerkaus. It's 50-50 on whether you think he hit with those or he missed with those. I don't think he clearly didn't strike out with them, right? They're valuable players to this basketball team. Now, was Ben counted on to do more than he's capable of? Maybe. And I'm beginning to think that might be where we're at right now. He's just not quite the number 2 or 3 guy on a basketball team that maybe Brad wanted him to be. He's clearly no Marcus Damask. But ever since he's been coming off the bench, he seems to have kind of settled into his role. He just had his best defensive game of his season against the Gophers. And when he can hit those wide open threes, because the pressure is no longer on him to hit those threes, he's not starting. I think he can still be a valuable player to this basketball team. Kylan Boswell started off the season great. And he is clearly right now still our defensive stalwart when it comes to the perimeter. Yeah, he has issues as well. And he takes shots that you just kind of shake your head at. He's so good at getting to the hole and just not finishing with some of his layups. But overall, again, I still think Kylan is a plus overall to the season as opposed to a negative. Kerry Booth, sure. That one simply didn't work out. But now, again, I ask you, when you're rebuilding a roster entirely and you've hit on 6, 7 guys, maybe even 8 guys, I think you've done a pretty good job. The Big Ten is a very difficult conference to win in. And that's when you have everybody returning. So Brad has had to kind of adjust his roster a little bit because he's adjusted his expectations. He's adjusted his own standards. He wants to win national titles. Next year's team won't have the roster turnover this year's team will. I expect Kylan to come back. I expect Trey White to come back. I didn't even mention Trey White a couple minutes ago. I expect Tomislav Ivičić to come back. And I'm very hopeful that Morez Johnson Jr. comes back. Brad Underwood hit a home run with Kasper Shakishonis, and it looks like he made the right talent call in Will Riley. Is he going to be able to do that again next year? That's going to be the key to find out who the best player, the alpha, is going to be on next year's basketball team. But he's proving over and over again that he can do it. But the different about next year's team is going to be, it's going to be more of a veteran team. A lot of the guys on this year's roster, I fully expect to come back. Kylan will be back. As I mentioned, Trey should be back. Tomislav should be back. You're not going to have the big, massive roster turnover that you had this year. And because of that, we'll see where Illinois goes next year. But this season, I understand 8-6 is not acceptable. But I also tell you that the circumstances are quite difficult. And he's dealing with a lot of adversity and issues that a lot of the other Big Ten coaches aren't dealing with. And I know you guys are saying, well, this is self-inflicted. He decided to go down this path. But there's a reason he decided to go down this path. He went down this path because he wants to win a national title. He's not just content winning the Big Ten Conference anymore. I'm going to try not to sound rude here, but I've seen the Big Ten Conference. I've seen more Purdue games than I can count. Michigan State, I've been paying a lot of attention to. They're very good basketball teams, but they're not going to win a national championship this year. And if one of them does, please, if you're a Boilermaker or if you're a Spartan, go back and clip this and shove it in my face after the season's over. I think they can very well, and they probably should, one of them, win the Big Ten Conference. But Brad I think winning the Big Ten Conference is just a secondary goal for him now. He has higher expectations for us. He wants to win national championships. And in order to win national championships, you have to not only bring in the best talent, but you have to bring the right size. And sometimes it means, cutting some of the players that you have because you want to be better. As I mentioned earlier, he lost Amani Hansberry and Sincere Harris because Chester Frazier decided to move on to West Virginia. You know why? Because Chester Frazier, as beloved as he is as an alum, he was very good at recruiting the grindy, good college basketball player. Problem is, while that's valuable, it could limit your ceiling. And Brad's already feeling he might be at his ceiling when it comes to the Big Ten Conference. He's ready to shatter that ceiling. He wants to win national championships. Do you? When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in on the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. Right now, the new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. And welcome back to the second segment today on Locked On Illini. If you haven't already hit that subscribe button, make sure you do. Make sure you hit that like button, whether you agree with me or you don't agree with me. If you're watching this on YouTube, on my left side, you'll see that the second segment, we're talking to JR for the Big Ten Power Rankings, as we usually do on the Monday episode. But I got a little long-winded, and I realized that in that first segment, I didn't get to quite finish and articulate my thoughts. And that's what I kind of want to do now. So, JR, I'm going to release this episode in a little bit, maybe a little bit later on Monday. I just kind of want to finish my thoughts because I know the Brad Underwood detractors are out there and they're going to be talking about, hey, it doesn't matter. Look, when you're paid this amount of money, I think he's a top 8 paid coach in college basketball right now. If you're paid that much in college basketball, well, then you know what? You shouldn't have these sort of years where you have to finish 8-6 or middle of the Big Ten. And you know what? I kind of agree with you. I'm not saying that you are wrong. What I am saying is, hey, the season isn't over yet. And I know I'm trying to stay a little low right now because, look, there's a lot of hate on the Illini basketball team right now, especially the detractors of Brad Underwood are being exceptionally loud. And maybe that comes with some sort of expectation because, look, Illinois' fan base is loud. They're very passionate. And they're one of the reasons that this here channel that you're watching is one of the fastest growing channels on the Locked On network. It's because even though the network itself didn't realize how passionate Illinois fans were, I did. And I have confirmation because of how fast this channel is growing. But with that, you get the positive passion and what some might dub as negative passion. And again, a lot of it is against Brad Underwood. After that game against the Rutgers, well, let's be honest. A lot of people were like, hey, this season is a failure at this point, and Brad Underwood is a failure. All I'm saying is, I'm not saying this season isn't. All I'm saying is let's just see what happens. Right now, Will Riley seemingly has turned his season around. Because Fresh Shonis went through a freshman slump that almost 95% of freshmen go through. Tommy just needs to get healthy. That's what we've been waiting on. Again, he's someone who's been dealing with issues that seemingly, whether it comes to his illness and then injury or whatnot, but hopefully he's starting to get healthy. Trey White, he had a fantastic month of December, and then he struggled a little bit at the end of January. And he's been sick. Let's see what he does when he comes back. DGL, he's sick. You know what? I don't think he's going to be sick much longer. The flu doesn't take that long. This Illinois team has had a lot of adversity to deal with. And other fan bases, when you say that, say you're making excuses. I'm not making excuses. Simply, 8-6 is not acceptable. But technically, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, the season hasn't ended yet. It's just 8-6. Let me ask you a question. If this team ultimately finishes 13-7 or 12-8 in the Big Ten Conference, and let's just say they have in the conference tournament they win 2 or 3 games, and then they get knocked out, but they ultimately make the Sweet 16 or the Elite 8, is this season then a failure? With all the context that I just provided, a Big Ten coach essentially revamping his entire roster and still almost duplicating what he did the year prior, which happened to be, by the way, one of the most successful seasons that Illinois basketball has ever had. Is that season still a failure? Some of you are going to say yes. And again, because some of you are going to have a mindset that, hey, you went to the Elite 8 last year. That means, to maintain positive momentum, you need to make the Final Four this year. I just don't know if I agree with that. I like the growth that I'm seeing from this basketball team right now. And again, if they ultimately fizzle out in the first weekend, or, hey, let's be honest, if they don't turn things around and they end up being a 7 seed or an 8 seed in the first round, they very well might lose in that first game. And then I'm going to come right back on here, right here on Locked On Illini, and be like, hey, this season did not live up to expectations. But what I'm saying is right now, after the Elite 8 season that we just had, I think some of you are just being too quick to be ready to let go of one of the most successful coaches, inarguably, in my opinion, this at least a top 2 coach this program has ever had. Again, Lou Henson, God bless him, was a little bit before my time, so it's hard for me to gauge those two. But Bill Self wasn't here nearly as long as Brad has. So I think Brad has overtaken Bill, at least as an Illinois coach. Obviously, Bill Self is going to be, once he retires, going to be one of the greatest college basketball coaches of all time. That's a different conversation. But I'm not ready. And quite honestly, I don't really entertain the idea that Brad right now is not the right coach for this program. I will give you the floor if you don't agree with me, as I always do on the post game. There's a bunch of you in the comment section, and if you do watch these post game shows, I give voice to those who just don't like Brad Underwood, and I know it. I acknowledge it right, in while that show's happening. Like, hey, I know you're gonna have your moment right now. Enjoy. I'm just not there yet. The season is still. It's. I wouldn't say it's young, but it's not over. And right now, again, maybe I understand it's just Minnesota, but slowly I might be tricking myself into believing into this team again. If Will Riley continues on the projection that he's on, if Kasparis really is out of this funk that he was when it comes to this freshman wall, I'll say it again. Brad Underwood's intention with building this team was to go beyond winning the Big Ten Conference. And what he's trying to do is he's trying to build a higher ceiling to his basketball teams from this point on. With that comes higher volatility. And again, if you are an everydayer of this show, I said this very early in the season. I was like, hey, this season's going to be a roller coaster ride because of the way this team was put together with all the young players, and quite honestly, just when you put 10 guys together who've just never played basketball before. They don't know each other's likes and dislikes and ins and outs. They're still trying to figure it out. And kind of in some sort of way, that's exactly what we're seeing happen. But this team's season's not over yet. And I'm actually quite excited to see what the potential is. We're getting kicked right now. Whether it's Michigan State fans, whether it's Purdue fans saying, hey, look, Illinois, we told you, was way overrated. Look at them now. Even though they weren't that overrated. Again, I keep saying Illinois was projected to be fourth in the conference coming into this year. Right now, technically, again, I think we're seventh, but the season's not over yet. Who knows? If they start turning things around and they end up winning 12 games, 13 games, they still might finish right around four. But what happens in March? That's what we'll find out. And in some ways, more importantly, what happens next year? Those of you who've been watching this show literally from the beginning, this show, Locked On Illini, started, I believe, around Memorial Day weekend. I talked about next year being the year that I think Illinois could win a national championship because this team, which is brand new, gets 1 year more together. And I don't think my mind has changed. And that's why I've not given up or even really wavered on the idea that Brad Underwood is the right coach of this program. I want to see what happens next year. I know Kasparis is not going to be here. And with the way he's playing, Will Riley probably won't be here. But I see a lot of the guys who are on the team right now, I think they will be here. And they're going to have another year of growth. And this team, who I still think can finish top 5 in the conference, can still make a Sweet 16. Next year, they're going to be returning a lot of that production. And then Brad just needs to do what Brad has basically focused himself on doing, bringing in the top end talent, the NBA talent. And he's been doing that the last couple of years. And next year, that's when we really start having a conversation of, hey, can they win a national championship? I think they can. Again, my sincerest apologies to JR. I'm going to release his episode probably later on Monday. So you're going to find out what exactly the Big Ten power rankings are and the big time schedule that Illinois has coming up this week. He's going to give us a little preview of that. Again, if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button. Make sure you like this video before we're done. I want to hear what you guys think. I know this is going to be very controversial because I know there's a certain percentage of you who don't agree with me and are ready to basically show Brad out the door, saying, hey, he's paid way too much for this kind of production. And in some sort of ways, I understand what you're saying. I just think context matters a little bit more, in particular on his case. And I'm willing to, I guess, look past this year, even though I'm not. I still want to see how this year finishes out before all of a sudden I decide on how I feel. But some of you aren't going to do that, but we'll see what happens. Again, we have this year, we have next year. It doesn't matter, game by game. Just make sure you're tuned in to right here on Locked On Illini. I'm producing content for you guys every single day. That's right. This episode gets released on February 10th, and there's not a single day in the year 2025 that there's not been a new piece of content on this very channel. So if you are an Illini fan, a supporter, alum, whatever it is, make sure you are subscribed to this channel because I promise you I'm going to deliver you daily coverage. And until next time, ILL, love you guys.